everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our session around cloud native ETL with built-in data integrity. We're really excited to introduce our new solution, ETL powered by Matillion, a joint solution from Precisely and Matillion that's designed to help organizations move faster with their data. If you're like most teams we speak with, you're probably under pressure to deliver data that's not just fast, but is also trusted, governed, and ready for AI and analytics. So today we're going to show you how to do exactly that. We'll start with a brief overview of what's changing in the market and some of the challenges we're hearing from customers like you. We'll walk through our new solution and how it helps you modernize via ETL, ELT pipelines. We're going to show a brief demo, and then we're going to spend a good amount of time talking with experts from both Matillion and Precisely as we dive deeper into this solution. So before we dive in, though, I quickly do want to introduce our speakers. We've got Arwan from Matillion, the Principal Architect for Sales Engineering Center of Excellence, as well as Carlos, one of our Senior Directors of Product Management, and myself, Brittany Schultz, a Product Marketing Manager here at Precisely. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So let's take a step back and start with what's actually driving all of this change. So today, organizations are typically dealing with an explosion of data, especially data that is either unstructured or could be semi-structured, while at the same time, there are these really growing demands that basically need organizations to deliver data faster. We're also seeing this large shift from traditional on-premises environments to more hybrid and multi-cloud environments. And this can typically add complexity to how data is managed, moved, and used. So on top of that, we have a rise of AI initiatives, and this need is really raising the bar. It's no longer enough just to have the data. This data has to be accurate, it's got to be complete, and fit for purpose in a timely manner. So the challenge is that many traditional ETL tools weren't necessarily built for this kind of hybrid or multi-cloud environment. They can often struggle to scale, they're difficult to maintain, and sometimes they can even create bottlenecks instead of enabling innovation, which is what organizations are looking to do today. So that's why many organizations are now rethinking their approach to data integration and transformation. When we talk to customers, we are typically hearing a consistent set of challenges. The first is going to be around data warehouse modernization. Ultimately, moving from these legacy on-premise systems and taking them to the cloud can be really complex and time-consuming, and often can be really risky or even disrupt your daily operations. And also, these legacy tools themselves can become the barrier at some point. They're often rigid, expensive, and difficult to scale. Teams are also stretched really thin. Data engineers are spending way too much time maintaining pipelines instead of delivering new value and innovation for the rest of the organization. And then finally, all of this will ultimately lead to bottlenecks when it comes to analytics and BI. So insights are delayed just because the data isn't necessarily ready or it's not in the right environment. And the impact of these challenges is real. You are dealing with things like slower decision making, higher operational cost, and missed opportunities for your business. And again, this is happening especially when it comes to AI and advanced analytics. So this is where the ETL powered by Matillion solution comes in. At its core, this solution is helping you move, transform, and trust your data in a way that is faster and more efficient. It combines Matillion's cloud-native ETL platform with Precisely strengths in data integrity, governance, and enrichment. So instead of just building pipelines, you're building pipelines that deliver trusted analytics and AI-ready data in a timely manner. This means that your data is not only available, but it's accurate, consistent, and usable from the very start. And that's what helps enable things like faster insights, better decisions, and ultimately more successful AI outcomes. So let's take a quick look at what this enables from a capability standpoint. So you've got this cloud-native ETL platform that's designed for modern data environments with a wide range of connectors across SaaS applications, databases, and files. There's a low-code visual interface that makes it easy to design transformations while still allowing advanced users to work directly in the languages that they need. And everything is built with automation in mind. So from things like pipeline orchestration to end-to-end workflow management. What this means in practice is that teams can build and scale pipelines much faster and with a lot less manual effort. It also makes data engineering more accessible. So users across the organization can contribute without necessarily sacrificing control, performance, or taking them away from what they need to be doing day to day. And importantly, it works seamlessly across these hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So you aren't necessarily locked into a single architecture. And what sets this solution apart? We've got kind of five buckets here that I want to talk about. So the first is going to be cloud native scalability and automation. So ETL powered by Matillion increases productivity by democratizing complex data engineering tasks and enabling users of all skill levels to automate their workflows as well as scale pipeline design seamlessly and do it in the cloud. Next is going to be this legacy to cloud connection. So having this reliable connectivity to bring popular as well as hard to access data sources into your modern cloud environments. There's going to be accelerated modernization with this kind of solution. So you're uniting this legacy data and cloud innovation to accelerate integration across all the platforms you're currently using. Platforms like Snowflake, Databricks, AWS, and more, ultimately allowing you to modernize your data ecosystem with confidence. And again, we've got this idea of end-to-end data management. So this is a single unified suite that moves, transforms, and governs data across its entire life cycle, simplifying things like complex architectures, reducing tool sprawl, and allowing you to deliver consistent connected data experiences. And finally, we've got this idea of data integrity within data movement. So every data set entering the cloud or analytics outputs is going to remain accurate, consistent, and complete. And this is going to be backed by Precisely's deep expertise in data integrity that will be embedded at every stage of the ETL process. So now that we've talked a little bit more about the solution, let's actually see it in action. Welcome to this demo of ETL powered by Matillion within Precisely Data Integration. Precisely has partnered with Matillion to bring cloud-native ETL and transformation capabilities directly into Precisely's platform, giving data teams a seamless, powerful way to build ETL and ELT pipelines without leaving their existing workflows. So here we are in the Precisely portal. We're going to go into the integration section where you can manage your data flows, including continuous and mainframe replication. And now you can do ETL and ELT pipelines. So notice the Continue to Matillion button in the middle. With just one click, users can launch Matillion's Data Productivity Cloud directly from the Precisely interface. No separate login, no switching tools. And after clicking through, we are taken to the Matillion account selector, where users can choose which Matillion account environment or account to enter. This single sign-on integration ensures a seamless handoff between the two platforms. And here we are inside Matillion's Data Productivity Cloud. The home screen shows recent pipelines and a set of services, as well as useful quick links. So the platform offers two core entry points here. You can design data pipelines or view pipeline runs. But let's create a new transformation pipeline from scratch. So here we're going to select the target environment, as well as see existing pipelines. But then we will use the pipeline creation dialog to actually name our pipeline. For this demo, we'll be building a pipeline that joins two data sets, a post table and a user table, to produce a social media ranking based on the total likes by country. So once the pipeline is actually open, we're going to be taken into the materials visual designer. So in the center is the canvas where we can drag and drop all of our components. We can open the Add Components panel. So here we see all the available transformation components, including components like input for reading source data, convert type for data transformations, aggregator, join, and many more. All of these are available at your fingertips in a searchable visual interface. And then along the right side is the property panel, where each component is configured to start building. We'll begin by adding two table input components, one for the post table and one for the users table. And as you can see, you can build this very easily without coding required. So as we build this, it's going to pull all the columns from the respective tables and serve as the starting point for our transformation logic. Each component is going to be configured via the properties panel along the right. And this is where we are going to specify the source, table, and column sections. Next, we are going to add a convert type and connect it to the post table. This component is used to ensure that our data has the correct format before the join. We use the conversions dialog to define the two types of conversions. The legs column is cast to a number type as well as the user ID column. So this step is important to use to ensure that the join expressions is going to work correctly, since both tables need matching data types on the join key. And you can see here that we can even sample the data directly from the convert type components to verify the effect of the transformation and confirm that both columns are now returning integer values. And you can see that here. So with the convert type configured, we can connect the components on the canvas. The user table and the convert type output both fit into the new join component. And as we go and build this, Matillion's validation engine will flag any incomplete configurations in real time. These validation queues in the properties panel guide will ask you to complete the required fields before the pipeline actually runs. So we're now going to open the join component and configure the join expressions. The join links the two datasets on a common field. So in this case, the user ID matching the post user ID to the Matillion's user ID. Matillion's expression editor provides a browsable list of available columns from both input tables, making it straightforward to build the join condition without writing in raw SQL. So after setting up the join condition, we're going to configure the column mappings, specifying which columns from the joint result should be passed downstream. And you can see that more information is being put into this panel along the right, further specifying what you're trying to create. Here you can see that you can use natural language and use a drop-down search feature to add different elements. So again, you don't need to use raw code to be able to create this. So currently we're setting up all of the different join expressions and conditions, ensuring that you are pulling all the correct information for your join. And after setting up the joint condition, we can configure the column mappings, specifying which columns from the join results should actually be passed downstream. So we can include key fields we need for pipelines from rankings, from things like rankings, lives, post title, country, and username. And these mappings define the output schema that flows into the next step of the pipeline. And here we're using a drop-down menu to select all of the source columns as well as the target columns. And there we have it. The transformation pipeline is coming together. We can see the full flow on the canvas. The posts and the user tables feed through a convert type and a join component with the combined output ready to be aggregated and written to the table. So now we're going to add an aggregation component and rewrite the table component. We write a table component to produce our final social media ranking by country. And just again, you can see here that this is being created with the drag and drop features. And that's it. The pipeline is now created and ready to run. And now I'm going to bring up Arwan and Carlos so we'll be able to go a little bit deeper. Oh, hey, Arwan and Carlos, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Brittany. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we're so excited to have you. And I'm so excited to talk about this solution. But before we dive into that, I think it's really important to kind of take a step back. So, from both of your perspectives, what do you feel like is the biggest barrier that organizations are facing today when it comes to trying to deliver data for AI and analytics?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
You touched on some of it earlier. With AI that is now kind of been interjected, what we're seeing is a lot of data that maybe companies previously didn't know, or they knew there was value in, they just didn't have the ability to tap into it, like unstructured text and,
Yeah.
transcripts of meetings and things like that. That's now all very possible. But the challenge is getting that data ready to do something with it. And with, products like things that Precisely provide and with Matillion, we make that a lot easier now. And so it's really opening the doors for a lot more advanced analytics that was not possible previously.
Yeah. And what do you feel like, Arwan, specifically, you see customers struggling with when it comes to legacy ETL or things like pipeline scalability?
Yeah, in a legacy architecture where everything was maybe done on-prem or managed by the customers themselves or the users themselves, scalability was always the bottleneck, right? You might be provisioning a data warehouse and all of its compute and RAM, all the requirements, and a very legacy way of thinking about that is that you would be planning your hardware needs for the next 5 years. So
Mhm.
you might be provisioning something that on a scale that you don't need today, but you're anticipating what your scale is going to be before that hardware becomes end of life. But now with the cloud, that becomes kind of a non-issue. The administration, the setup, the planning. With the cloud, you use the compute you need at the moment, and it'll scale with you as your needs grow.
Yeah. And Carlos, what's your take on this? What do you feel like are some of the challenges that organizations are facing today?
I think the biggest barrier I see is the weight of these legacy investments. I would say organizations have spent years, sometimes decades, building ETL pipelines on tools designed for a different era. And then now moving away from those tools is not just a technical challenge, it's also an organizational challenge.
Yeah.
So you have business processes that depend on those pipelines, teams that have learned how to work around their limitations. So the migration risk, keeps companies from doing this. I would say maybe another two small ones are the data silos are still there. Even though we
Yeah.
have been talking forever about having one single version of truth, those silos still persist, and getting them to speak the same language is difficult. I would say a third one that I think is important is the tribal knowledge that is hidden,
Sure.
uh, and I think this is about how legacy pipelines were built by people who are no longer at the company or were close to retirement, and nobody fully understands what each pipeline does, how the transformations that were built are working in certain ways, what breaks, and what needs to be changed. That makes modernization feel almost impossible or very risky, at least.
Yeah. So all of that sounds like it can be really difficult for organizations to tackle, but there are a lot of other issues facing organizations. So what makes this problem specifically more urgent, and why do you feel like it's become more urgent over the past like 2 to 3 years? What do you feel like's changed that now like this is actually a really big issue? And we can start with R1.
Yeah. Yeah, so what's changed in the last few years is, I mean, obviously, I kind of touched on that just a little bit ago, but it's really the AI era of things.
Hmm.
And, Carlos, you also just touched on, the data silos. So you've got more data silos when you've got AI interjected, right? Things that you didn't tap into before, now you want to. And you've got the cloud that's going to be where you can centralize all of that information, and now you have the power to actually do something with that, create that single version of the truth that Carlos mentioned, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think that's the key part. Like AI is a bigger trigger here than ever before, because you need data and good data to be able to leverage AI to the fullest, right? If you don't have that, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's the garbage in, garbage out principle, right? Like if your data isn't fit for purpose, it can't be understood by the systems, like you're not really going to get anything beneficial coming out. And it's just gonna, I don't know, almost like hamstring your organization more than help it at that point if you're not using it properly. So R1, I have another question for you here. So how are cloud native platforms changing expectations for things like speed, scalability, and ease of use?
Yeah, kind of going back to the AI topic of things, in an on-prem kind of architecture, let's say I want to now start to get more analytics out of unstructured text, things that are in PDFs. If you think about solving that yourself, that becomes a very daunting thing to think about, especially doing it on-prem, right? But
Yeah.
cloud vendors like AWS, Azure, and other third parties, they have services that do these things, right? Extract the raw text from what we call multimodal data sources, right? Because they come in a lot of different formats at this point. And so cloud providers out there have the services that make that kind of a non-issue. The complexity is removed, and Matillion and Precisely can hook into those. So the Matillion platform has the low-code components that can make that multimodal translation into raw text very simple and a non-issue. And it's scalable at the same time. So as your needs grow, then the cloud will scale with you.
Yeah. And then Carlos, I'd like to get your perspective on how having things like data quality and data governance kind of layer into this change and like how organizations are changing their expectations for what data should look like now.
Yeah, I think quality is the foundation of trustworthy analytics. So when organizations move to the cloud for speed and scale, they often discover that data arriving at their warehouses is either incomplete, inconsistent, or sometimes even plain wrong. So you can have the fastest and most scalable pipeline in the world, but if the data quality isn't there, your analysts and AI models are working with flow inputs. And at Precisely, data quality is not an afterthought. It's actually basically from the start on the pipeline. I would say on governance is what makes democratization safe. So we want to make all this data accessible to business users, not just engineers. And democratization without governance creates a new set of problems, right? Who owns the data? Who can access it? Is the authoritative customer record? Governance is what makes it safe to give more people access to more data. And that's especially critical especially in regulated industries.
Yeah. And I know like we Precisely definitely work with a lot of regulated industries, so that can be really important. Um, so kind of moving on here, what gaps do we feel like exist when organizations try to solve this problem with a standalone ETL or a point solution? Arwan, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
You run into vendor sprawl, right? So that can be because with point solutions, developer A might be using a certain tooling, maybe they're doing some high coding. Developer B might be using something else. So there's not really just that enterprise level alignment on how we do things as a standard, right? And then you do get into that kind of tribal knowledge trap, right? Where developer A knows what they do, but developer B can't really contribute to that because they're not as familiar with the stack. And that turns into scalability issues as well, and obviously, turns into bottlenecks as far as delivering your data product at the end of the day.
And I'm sure that that can be really frustrating. So, with that being the case, would you two mind taking some time to talk about why bringing together, and I know that we started to talk about it, but like specifically why bringing together Matillion and Precisely into a single solution can kind of address some of the pre-existing gaps that we've been talking about. Carlos, we can start with you. if you'd like.
Yeah, I would say Precisely brings what cloud native tools can reach. So Matillion is purpose built for the cloud data warehouse world. It's best in class at transformations, scalability in the modern, ELT or ETL pattern. What Precisely adds is connectivity to the hard stuff. So all the mainframe, IBM, iSystems, legacy databases, SAP, the sources that cloud native tools simply weren't designed to reach. And then together we close the gap between where enterprise data actually lives today, where analytics needs to go. I would say another one is simplicity, right? The practical benefit is simplicity because instead of managing 3 or 4 vendors, a legacy ETL tool, a cloud transformation layer, a data quality product, a connectivity solution, you have everything integrated in one solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the scalability side of things, tapping into the power of your cloud data warehouse, which is what Matillion natively does, that's really going to give you the ability to scale as your data volume scales, right? I've seen in past lives where I went back to where you plan your data warehouse for the compute you need in the future. So very often things are seasonal. Maybe during a Q4 period of time, your data volumes are exponentially larger than other periods of the year, and your data warehouse needs to scale for that or be provisioned for that. But in the cloud and with how Matillion works with your cloud data warehouse, you've got that compute available to you when you need it, but you're not paying for it until you actually need to use it.
Mm. And that seems kind of like the big difference here, especially with everything that's going on. Like being cost conscious is so, so important. So being able to have more control over that and still be able to deliver all of this stuff across the organization, get more people the opportunity to use it, I guess is probably a really big deal for organizations. Um, so moving into some of more real world scenarios, and R1, I think you just gave a great one, but what do you feel like are some of the most common use cases where you would need a solution like ETL powered by Matillion?
Yeah, I gave it that example, and it's very often something like maybe subscribe to a traditional medallion architecture, right? You're ingesting your raw data into the bronze layer, and so Matillion's got all of our connectors for all your various things from, on-premises databases to SaaS platforms like Salesforce, Workday. Very often, if there's not a connector that we provide out of the box, we've got a custom connector feature that is, if the thing you want to integrate with has a RESTful API available, our platform allows you to build your own bespoke connector to tap into that API to get your that data into your cloud data warehouse. But when it comes to building the pipelines, I like to think of it as code optional. It's going to appeal to a lot of different personas. It does democratize the data because with the low code aspect, you can have the less technical person that knows the data and understands what they want to do with the data be empowered to actually do things with it. But then someone that maybe is higher code will still like our platform because you can, write SQL if you want to and have that run, as well as things like Python and things like that. But it's really just that idea of democratizing data, giving that data, putting the data in the hands of the people that need to use it or are, that get value out of it, removing that bottleneck from the data engineering teams so that the data engineers can work on the more interesting, more technical problems, right?
Yeah. And Carlos, what do you think are just some common use cases that you would see where solution would help?
I think the impact, I would say 3. I think that faster time to insight is one. So, like the most immediate impact customers can see is speed. When you eliminate these bottlenecks of waiting for an engineer to build or debug a transformation, you can get to the insights a lot faster. And that's a meaningful competitive advantage. I think R1 touched on another one, which was the cost savings, that are real and not theoretical. Like, legacy ETL infrastructure was always sized for peak load, and then you bought the hardware for the biggest day of the year. Cloud changes that model entirely, right? And with Matillion and the data integration service, you pay for what you actually use. I would say the third one is you free up your technical resources, right? So one of the most underappreciated benefits is that what that's for your team bandwidth. When a business analyst can build and iterate with a pipeline without, having to fill a ticket or having an engineer having to deal with this, you free up that person for a higher value work. So I think that's exactly what democratization story is in practice, and it's tangible.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that organizations can really grasp onto because now it really is all about innovating, doing it faster, doing it better, and doing it in a way that's automated. So being able to allow or like more people in your organization to be able to get access to the data that they need when they need it in a way that is fit for purpose is really going to bring a lot of value. And again, I think you guys are making a really good point. It's not just the data engineers, it's not just the technical people that are able to do this. It is the people who are kind of using the data for some of these more strategic, just more of these more strategic things. So if a team was to be starting their modernization journey today, where do you feel like they should begin? What do you feel like teams should be looking for when they're evaluating a modern ETL or ELT solution?
Yeah, I like to say, don't boil the ocean. That's a pretty common, phrase. So when you're looking to modernize your data warehousing and your analytics stack, you're not going to, don't try and do everything all at once.
Yeah.
Identify the, maybe existing pipelines that are of high value to the business, or maybe ones that are tapping into those high value source systems, and bring over those, and you can start to bring over individually or start to migrate one by one. But I would always advise to identify what is the one with the maybe most high value from a business perspective, maybe with the moderate or less complexity, right? Just so you can see the value quickly. Because that, at the end of the day, in an enterprise scenario, your result, it's a results driven organization. Typically companies are results driven, and so you do not want to have something that you're going to deliver something a year from now. You want to be able to show some value as quickly as possible. That's where I say identify high value, medium to low complexity, focus on that first, and then you can build from there.
That's awesome. I totally agree. I would say, also evaluate beyond transformation features, so when teams evaluate a modern ETL solution, they usually focus on the transformation capabilities and the connector library, I guess. And those matter a lot, obviously. But the questions that they need to ask themselves is, how does this fit in the broader data architecture? Does it support your governance requirements? Can it reach all your data sources, including your legacy systems? Because the value of any ETL tool is only as good as the data it can actually reach. I would say the other one I have in mind is protect your options and avoid any lock-in. The cloud has created some incredible choices like Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, Databricks, etc. Make sure that the solution that you choose works across platforms and doesn't lock you into one specific vendor or vendor ecosystem. And our partnership with Matillion is designed exactly around this, right? Giving you best-in-class transformation capabilities, but keeping you also the options open for every layer of the stack.
Yeah. And I feel like that becomes more and more relevant because it feels like there are new tools being created every single day. And, who's really doing really great today may not necessarily be the standard tomorrow. So, like, it is so important to be able to have that flexibility because things are changing so quickly. Like, I don't know. We don't know what 5 years is going to look like from now, let alone like 6 months from now. So it's so important to be able to have that ability to really make sure that you can keep your arms around the data that exists within your stack now, but still be able to keep that forward-looking idea and be able to grow in the future without necessarily needing to buy another tool, needing to go through all of that vendor, like just going through and evaluating all the different vendors. So how would you say, kind of to that point, talking about looking at the future, how do you feel like we're going to see data pipelines evolve over the next few years? And in this case, I'm especially thinking about like the introduction of AI and automation when it comes to that. And R1, we can start with you.
Yeah, with AI at Matillion, we have Maya now, which is a team of agentic agents. And that's kind of where the industry is going, where you're going to have AI at every level of the data pipeline, to be quite honest, AI assisting in developing the pipeline to, at scale. But AI interjected in the pipelines, like I was saying earlier, things like, extracting the text from multimodal sources, doing vector embeddings, right? And our platform supports all of that as well. But I think that that's where we're going to be seeing is just AI in every layer, even down at the end of the journey where you're visualizing the data, right? Where you're now going to be using natural language tools to interact with that curated data. And things like Precisely and Matillion, we're going to be providing all of the tools that at the end of the day allows that at the end of the journey where your business users interacting with that data via natural language, they can trust the answers because we all know with AI today, you know, there's a lot of hallucinations and things that you might need to mitigate against, right? And so if you have a proper pipeline, data pipeline in place, you mitigate a lot of that. But that's where we're seeing what pipelines are going to be looking like in the future, with a lot of these things being interjected and accounted for.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I have 2 points maybe. I think AI is moving into the pipeline, not just the end of the pipeline, you know. So the most exciting shift I see is AI becoming part of the pipeline itself. So not just the visualization layer. And I think about, you know, sentiment analysis running on customer support tickets as part of your ETL process, or AI detecting quality anomalies in real time before bad data ever reaches your warehouse. So we're already seeing use cases like this, and the pipeline is becoming an intelligent system, not just a transport mechanism. Yeah. I would say the second one is natural language will change who builds pipelines and how these pipelines are built, right? Agents will be taking part of this a lot more than today. So I would say in the next few months, I'm not talking about even years, you know, natural language interfaces to fundamentally change who can build and interact with data pipelines. We're actively working on this, and business users will be able to say, show me revenue, you know, by region excluding trial accounts, and the system will handle the pipeline logic behind it. And I don't think that's actually science fiction. The technology is already there. It's just more about adoption and making it part of our products. And that's where the tools are heading. So yeah, that's exactly where, you know, why getting your data infrastructure right now or right today matters. You want clean governed data as the foundation when that moment arrives. And I think it's arriving soon. You know, we're working actively on it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that kind of hits home why a solution like this is so important because, you know, if you're saying, hey, this is going to take months, this isn't going to take years, like that's really fast. So because of that, I think I have one more question for you guys today. So if teams are going to walk away from this presentation, this fireside chat, and they only remember one thing, what's the one thing that you want people to walk away from this session remembering?
From my perspective, I think it's really just the power is in your hands with things like Precisely and Matillion. You've got one suite of products that addresses every layer of your AI journey, keeping it very simple, democratizing the data, and it's going to scale with you as your needs scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Matillion and Precisely together is not about making data pipelines faster and cheaper. It's more about making the data accessible to people who need it most, you know, exactly the democratization, as Arawan was mentioning, you know, business users, analysts, domain experts who understand questions, they shouldn't have to wait for an engineer to do this. I think that's possible with this partnership by itself. I think AI is only going to accelerate this in the future.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys both so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. And with that, I hope that you are leaving this session today with a better understanding of ETL powered by Matillion and how it can possibly impact your data integration efforts. If you found this session to be helpful, please consider exploring additional resources that we have around ETL powered by Matillion on precisely.com. I want to take another moment again just to thank you for listening, to thank our speakers who are incredible, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.